I will be exploring the same thriller genre with the comparison of two movies, Rear Window and Disturbia, to discuss the question, to what extent do thriller films differ throughout different time periods? Starting off with the infamous movie Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece was released in 1956, and it is a thriller movie. The movie is about a reporter photographer who's stuck on a wheelchair after an accident. L.B. Jeffries spends his days observing his neighborhood from his window in New York. He is regularly visited by his nurse, Stella, and his lover, Lisa Fairmont. His relationship with her is difficult. Jeffries criticizes her lack of taste for adventure, and he does not really want to get married. One evening, he heard a cry from the apartment opposite and saw his neighbor, Thorwald, carrying a heavy suitcase. He suspects him of killing his wife, and confides his suspicions to Stella and Lisa. They later attempt to prove Thorwald guilty, while Jeffries is stuck to his wheelchair, spying on the neighbors. The movie Disturbia was released in 2007 by the director DJ Caruso. It is about a 17-year-old boy named Cale Brecht. Years ago, he lost his father in a terrible car accident. This caused him to have bad temper, which in the future leads him to punch his Spanish teacher. At the end of the judgment that follows, Cale is sentenced to house arrest. Cale is extremely bored, especially as his mother Julie, who is tired of his attitude, takes his Xbox and television away. Cale then begins to be close to his neighborhood, and to observe the behaviors of his neighbors, using a pair of binoculars. Until the day when a pretty blonde girl just arrived in the neighborhood, as well as a suspicious neighbor who might have murdered a woman. The theme of voyeurism is extremely frequent upon both movies, as both protagonists have an obsession in analyzing the lives of their neighbors. In Rear Window, Jeffries has gained knowledge on his neighbors by spending all his days observing them without even having to interact with them in any way. He knows about the recently married couple, single lonely lady, and the couple with issues in their marriage, and much more. Similarly, in the movie Disturbia, Cale has also gotten to know the secrets of his neighbors, for example, how the neighbor waits a certain amount of time so that the husband can leave and she can have her affair. Both films, in addition to this meta-cinematic component, voyeurism characterizes the position of a character animated by an intense desire to see the lives of people around them, as the protagonists are extremely bored and both are forced to stay at home. One character having a broken leg and the other one having to stay home because of their house arrest. Jeffries is very richly characterized. He is both a voyeur, a filmmaker, and a film buff. As soon as he's alone, he cannot help looking indiscreetly out of the window. He is a filmmaker. He imagines and stages a story. He is also a film buff. He observes and he interprets. Rear Window is a film about the irresistible love for images experienced by all human beings. The character Jeffries gradually leads his fiancée and his nurse to become voyeurs as well. "We become a race of voyeurs," said the nurse Stella at the beginning of the film, meaning that we're all Jeffries. Similarly, in the movie Disturbia, Cale spectates on his neighbors, as previously mentioned. But most importantly, just like in Rear Window, Cale manages to turn his friend and girlfriend into voyeurs, which leads to all of them starting to investigate their neighbor for potentially murdering a woman, just like Jeffries, his fiancée, and his nurse in Rear Window. Overall, the female characters are heterosexual, non-violent, and passive. Both of the female characters, who are portrayed as being the lovers of their protagonists, fit in the stereotypes of being beautiful women. Both are thin, blonde, and attractive. In both movies, the male gaze is used frequently. Because of the shots used in both movies from the male protagonist's point of view, despite one's gender, the viewers are forced to be a part of the male gaze. In both films, females are shown as sexual objects with the use of the Kuleshov cinematic effect, which will be explained more in depth. There are many shots in the movies where the protagonists are observing women with pleasure, as seen in their faces. In Rear Window, Jeffries enjoys his beautiful, blonde dancer neighbor that lives across his house with pleasure, and so does Cale, who is seen to frequently observe Ashley, when she's doing casual things such as swimming, reading a book, working out, and much more. Despite the fact that women in these films are presented as sexual objects, in Rear Window, Hitchcock takes the opposite of traditional cliches, since the male character is stuck in his wheelchair, passive, while the female character is active and takes the initiative. She's the one that gets out of the house to leave the note at the murderer's house and has dangerous encounters with the killer. She shows that she does not need to be protected by Jeffries. Similarly, in Disturbia, Ashley takes action in investigating the neighbors since Cale cannot get out of the house. She follows the murderer around and ends up having a dangerous encounter with the killer, leading him to threaten her for her life. But at the end of the movie, Ashley is protected by Cale from the neighbor as he tries to murder them inside the protagonist's house. One of the main themes discussed in the movie Rear Window is marriage and the dominance of heterosexual couples. Jeffrey's biggest problem is that he does not want to marry Lisa at the beginning of the movie due to the lack of adventure in her life. Also, due to each neighbor that Hitchcock uses to illustrate the problem of love and marriage. For example, the woman alone without a husband or lover, the single musician who gets drunk, the dancer who has lovers visiting her frequently, the childless couple who has postponed their affection on their little dog, and the married couple whose arguments are more and more violent each day, and the early married couple who are shown to be happy. But it is quoted in the film that they will fall apart just like the couple that fight all the time. And finally, the last stage of marriage that Hitchcock suggests, the murder of the woman. At the end of the film, Jeffries falls in love with Lisa for becoming more adventurous, which shows that now they are part of a cycle of marriage, in the early stages represented by the neighbors. One of Hitchcock's greatest talents is to be able to make images speak for itself. In other words, the ability of telling a visual story without needing a dialogue. The audience sees the entire movie in Jeffrey's point of view. The viewers see the movie from his camera, binoculars, and eyes, which automatically make the audience voyeurs as well. The protagonist has full credibility on what the audience sees. Since Jeffries is stuck in a wheelchair and cannot get out of the house, the only setting presented to the audience is inside of the house and the courtyard. As Jeffrey spectates on the neighbors, looking at each window regularly, the viewers are being told a different story in each frame, which are the windows of the neighbors' houses. In other words, each window the protagonist looks at, a different story is presented by Hitchcock. For example, Miss Lonely Hearts and the struggle she's been going through, or the suspected murder. Although Disturbia is highly influenced by Rear Window, the movie is less cinematic and more dependent on the dialogue. Unlike Rear Window, the director chooses to show outside of Cale's house, for example, the supermarket or the car where Ashley has encounters with the killer. In Rear Window, when Lisa was having encounters with the killer, the audience wasn't presented with the dialogue the killer and Lisa were having, since Jeffries couldn't hear them. This effect led the audience to imagine what was going on inside the house without the dialogue just by looking at the actions. But in Disturbia, the viewers are shown more than what the protagonist can see, including the dialogues. This suggests that Disturbia is more focused on the dialogue with the storytelling rather than the cinematography, which shows a difference between the recent movie Disturbia and older movie Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock. As mentioned, both movies similarly use the Kuleshov effect to show the internal emotions the protagonists are feeling while spectating on the neighbors. At times, the directors are able to show the pleasure or even the fear just from the faces of the characters and the shots that follow along. In conclusion, the same genre of thriller movies, Disturbia, which is highly influenced by Rear Window, has similarities and differences in the messages told throughout the film and ways in which they are presented, considering that Rear Window was made in 1956 and Disturbia was made in 2007.